Hi everybody, my name is Mike, I'm an alcoholic. I got to explain the prison thing, okay? We went to Morrison last night, and I've been working in federal prisons in Canada for 40 years. I kind of know my way around a little bit. So I made a mistake that I really never ever should have made. And I kept beeping the machine. We were going in and I was beeping the machine, and they got me, make sure your pockets are empty all the time. Beep, beep, beep. Take off your belt, go to the machine, beep, beep, beep. Take off your glasses, go to the machine, beep, beep, beep. He says, must be something in your shoes. Now, I bought these shoes just because they're shoes. They're not bad shoes. They got a piece of steel on the bottom, kind of brace, you know. I get them for that reason, but they do. And technically, the technical term for that piece of steel is shank. And this guy, the guard was on the gate. I think he was relatively new. I said, "Oh, that's just a shank in my shoe." The word came out of my mouth. I said, "Oh no, oh no." And this guy his eyes went like that, and he kind of puckered up, and he didn't know what to do, and he was calling his supervisor. And, oh man, it went on for like 10 minutes. And anyway, they finally made me take off my shoes, and they stuck the wand up the shoe, and they let me in eventually. Hey, I thought, you think you know a few things, but anyway. Anyway, let me tell you that I'm really, really, really privileged to be here and happy to be here. For a number of reasons. First of all, I got to tell you, I was here the night this group was formed in Doug Smith's golf shop, some close to 20 years ago. I don't know the exact date now, but I was down to do some things with Tom, and he says, "Well, we're forming a new group." And I went to this meeting with him, and there was like 12 or 14 people there, and they sat and talked about what kind of group they wanted to have and what they were going to do to have it. And I heard, I don't explain this very well, but I heard the fullness of AA for the first time. I'll explain that a little bit more in a bit. Well, I'll get to it right now. Back in Moncton in those days, anybody know what Moncton is? I'll tell you. Okay, I'm sure you're dying to find out. If you want to go to Moncton, you drive to Maine. Go as far north as you can in Maine, turn right, 100 miles, that's Moncton. There we are. Back in Moncton in those days, 25, 26 years ago, or no more than that, about 27, 28 years ago, the mantra of Alcoholics Anonymous in Moncton was, don't drink and go to meetings and you'll be okay. You didn't hear anything about steps or service or anything else. And I spent a long time trying to get sober. I spent a long time trying to get sober. And I tripped over my feet so many times because of something that I think a lot of us do, and what I did, you know. I always believed starting out that I need to understand something before I do it. I need to know the result of it before I do it. And that's just ego, right? But it's also fear. I want to know what's going to happen. And we're raised that way. And things that happened to me along the way just confirmed that. And I did that for 10 years, trying to figure out why is it that I just can't stay sober. On September the 5th, 1988, a doctor, a psychiatrist, drove me from Moncton to Prince Edward Island, which is the province next to us. It's a 2.5-hour drive to that. 11 o'clock at night, he put me in the car and he drove me to a treatment center in Charlottetown, Prince Edward Island, where I visited for the second time. And I woke up the next afternoon actually, in the same bed, in the same room, on the same floor that I had woken up in 2 years before that. And you want to talk about a sense of deja vu, like how did I get here again, you know? But I'll come back to that again. I hope, I pray, and if I keep doing what I'm doing, I assume that that's the last time I drank on September 5th, 1988. That whole trip started 20 years or so before that. I knew what alcoholism looked like. I had seen alcoholism, and I'd seen it in my own home, and my father was alcoholic, and he did what I did. I saw him, I watched him try to quit a number of times, and he just couldn't do it. And so I saw alcoholism firsthand, and my picture of alcoholism was like people's first thing that happens when an alcoholic drinks is his face changes, and then his mood changes, and then his attitude changes, and then his voice changes, and then the violence starts. Then the police show up. That's alcoholism from my point of view. When you're a little kid, and I was 10, 11 years old going through that, when you are that age, you don't get angry, you just get afraid. You don't know what's going on, and you don't understand why it's happening, and so you're afraid and you're confused, and like, why does he want to do that? Why would he do that to us? And I grew up like that. And as you get older, you stop being afraid, you start being angry. At least you think it's angry, but it's really just more fear. But you get angry. And I thought, him and I kind of had it out a couple of times, and I just swore to the core of my being, I would never, ever be like that. I will not be him. I will not be a damn drunk. And then one night when I was 15 years old, somebody passed me a bottle. And we were at a party. Ironically enough, this party took place. The party took place across the street from the house we lost because of my father's alcoholism. So I'm standing in front of that house, and somebody passes me a bottle. Passes the bottle to the guy who swore he would never be like that, right? And I take a drink. And all the problems I never knew I had went away. The fear went away, the confusion went away, everything went away. I didn't get drunk, I didn't get in a fight, I didn't get sick, I didn't get nasty, I didn't get anything. There was just this sense of ease and comfort that the big book talks about. I just felt relaxed. And when I look at it now, every time I drank after that, that's exactly the feeling that I drank for. And I would speed up the way I drank so I could get there quick. For a little while it kind of worked that way. And then I noticed that it started to take, I didn't notice it back then, but I noticed it now, that it started to take more to get the job done. And then I noticed that I noticed now that I was doing it more often than I used to. And then when I look back at it, every time I went somewhere and we were having a party or doing something that I wanted to feel part of, I would drink, and I would drink to get that feeling again. And after a while, it took a lot to get the job done, and very often it didn't get done. But I could bore you with the details of my drinking, but most of you probably have as good a story as mine. But I'll tell you that over the next 8 years, or 10 years actually, my drinking progressed to the point that I knew there was something wrong with my drinking. Goddard Street in Halifax. Halifax is in Nova Scotia, in case you don't know. It's a seaport right on the coast, and it's Halifax can be a tough town. If you're walking down Goddard Street, which is the toughest part of Halifax, at 3 o'clock in the afternoon looking for a drink and worrying about who's going to see you, you got to know that there's something wrong with your drinking. Normal people don't do that. And I knew that, but that's what I did. I kind of blanked it out of my mind for the time being and kept on going. And eventually I got a job with the federal government, and as Wallace had said, thank you for the introduction, by the way. I got a job with the federal government and in corrections. And I did pretty well in that job. Fact is, I walked into the place, I started to work in a maximum security prison in Dorchester, New Brunswick, about an hour from where I live. And I hated it. The place is about 125 years old, and it's just one of those old dungeon type places that has been renovated 14 times. And anyway, I walked in there, and I had been there on a visit once before, and I swore I'd never go in there again either, but it was the only job available, so I took it, and I went in there and I hated it. And the truth be known, I was afraid of it. What's a nice boy to be doing in a place like this, But then I kind of made a decision. I was looking around and I said, I can't walk around like this forever. I can't be going around kind of looking over my shoulder and what's going on. And I decided that the only way I'm going to survive in this place is to go where people won't go. So I would go in the ranges where other people wouldn't go, and I'd go into segregation where other people wouldn't go, and I'd go into shops where there was trouble and other people wouldn't go, and I was terrified. And but people were saying, "This guy's really good." I mean, they did a little that they know, you know. So what happened was, as a result of that, in our country, it takes anywhere from 15 to 17 years to become a warden. And at 7 years, I was in the service 7 years, and they made me warden of that maximum security penitentiary, and it was in trouble. And my boss said to me, you know, like, go fix it. You know, let's just, I think those were the words, go fix it. And so I went in there, and we started to do a number of things, and they worked out pretty well. And I grabbed this attitude, I took on this attitude of work hard, play hard. And so I would go there 7 o'clock in the morning, and we would work till 7 or 8 o'clock at night, and then we might either go out partying, a bunch of people that work with me, or I would go home. We wouldn't go partying every night or anything like that, but I would go home, and what people didn't know, my bosses didn't know, and the people that didn't work for me, that did work for me, didn't know, was I had this secret. And my secret was that I would go home and I would drink. And I would drink till 1 or 2 or 3 o'clock in the morning. And I would make these wonderful plans for the next day. One time I wrote this wonderful plan for the next day. And I gave it to the lady that worked as my assistant the next morning. I said, here, make that happen, will you? And she came back about 5 minutes later and she said, I will make that happen. If you can tell me what it says, because I can't read it. So, and that kind of signaled the beginning of the slide downhill, you know. Things started to happen. I got a little on the volatile side. I didn't do anything totally crazy. But my bosses started noticing my drinking. And my boss said to me, you work really hard and you get a lot of things done, and that's really great. And but you drink a bit, you know, like you should kind of calm down a little bit with your drinking. I said, oh yeah, don't worry about me, I'm okay. And then my staff started to come to me. Now, ordinarily, staff do not go to wardens and tell them that they drink too much, right? And but actually, people came to my office and said, look, we really like you. And you're hurting yourself, and we don't want to see it happen. We don't know what to do. We'll do anything for you. We'll go to the wall for you. But we don't want to see you die like this. And I said, don't worry about it. I'll take care of it. And then my bosses started calling me in and saying, listen, this is getting serious. People are talking. We're worried about you. And one boss said to me, tell you what, if you stop drinking for a year, we'll give you another promotion. I said, watch me. And I stopped drinking for a year. And they gave me my promotion. They just jacked my pay up a little bit. And so I had to go and celebrate, right? I mean, what's the guy to do, you know? And anyway, so things started going downhill, and you know, I had gotten married, and I had 2 sons at that time. And they were really important. And I had sworn, I remember when Kevin, my first boy, was born, I swore that I would be the best father in the whole world. And we can't just be good fathers, we got to be the best father in the world, right? I will be the best father. This kid has got it made, you know. That kid, when he was 16 years old, wrote me a letter. And the letter said, I'm crying as I'm writing this letter. He said, you're dying and I don't know what to do about it. He said, I just don't know what to do. So I said, I will stop for him. And I did. I went off to a treatment center. That treatment center, same one, for the first time. And then I started to encounter what I believe many of us have as a problem. I believed, without knowing that I believed this, that if I can understand it, I will do it. When I do this, this is going to happen. That's called being in control. That's called having power, you know. And I think that we do that. We don't know that we do it, but we walk in the door and we do that. So people get discouraged when they walk in and they don't understand. And we're impatient. Not only do we not understand, we don't get what we think we're supposed to get fast enough. And that's what I did. And so I joined AA. Well, I didn't join AA. I went to AA and heard, don't drink, go to meetings, you'll be okay. And I said, okay, and I will go to meetings, and I stopped drinking. And after a while, this spring would start in my stomach. It's like winding up a clock, right? It would just get tighter and tighter and tighter, and boom, just bang, and I'd be gone again, you know. And I couldn't understand it. I just couldn't understand it. My bosses were really getting not happy with me. And so I came back from that treatment center, and one of the things that happened in that particular treatment center, by the way, it's important to know, if you worked in that place, you had to be an active member of Alcoholics Anonymous. The doctor that ran the place was a member of AA. He had gotten sober in AA and eventually had become an addictionologist, and he knew his stuff. But he insisted that everybody that worked there belonged to AA and were active in the community. They had to belong to a community group. They had to be in service in the community group. They had to sponsor people in the community for fun and for free. And if they didn't do that, they didn't work there. So I got dumped into the middle of AA on that first trip, and I listened to what people were saying about alcoholism. I didn't catch the AA part. I would listen to what they said about the alcoholism. And I thought I understood alcoholism. So therefore, if I understand it, I don't have to drink anymore. So I went home and did nothing more than I did before. Now that I understand, I'm okay. A year and a half later, I woke up one morning, and I promise you, my first thought of the day, my very first thought of the day was, I have two priorities today. One, her. That was my second wife. The first one had gotten away when I wasn't looking. And two was him. The first one had taken my two sons with her. And my new wife and I had another son. He was 2.5. Jamie was 2.5. And I said, he's number 2 priority today. And I meant it. It was the first thing I thought of the day, and I meant it. I didn't understand I was dealing with untreated alcoholism. And I don't know what happened. I'll tell you what did happen, though. I don't know why it happened, but it did happen. At 9 o'clock, I had my finger in her face, priority number 1. And I was telling her she was crazy. And I was telling her she should get out of the house. And I was telling her I was babbling. And it really felt like a crazy man standing outside yourself. You know, I was standing outside my body, watching this fool babble. And not understanding what's going on, but knowing that if I don't take a drink, I'm going to go absolutely crazy today. And so, before the day was out, I was drinking again. And I drank that time for 10 days. And I did more harm and more hurt in those 10 days than I like to admit to everybody that cared about me. I got in serious trouble at work. My boss called me in. There's a number of bosses in my story, you know. Like I could go on about bosses forever. I had umpteen bosses. I kept changing them. But this one boss, I figured he had it in for me, right? Because they always do. They had it in for us. And he called me in and he says, I hear you're drinking again. And the slick alcoholic, right? I said, well, yeah, I've had a few. He said, no, you've had more than a few. I need to talk to you about your drinking. I said, well, too bad, though. I have a doctor's appointment today, so I have to leave. No, we have to talk about your drinking. And I said, are you telling me I cannot go to my doctor's appointment? Is that what you're saying? And he said, go to your doctor's appointment and get right back here. We need to talk about your drinking. So I left and went to the bar. I didn't have any doctor's appointment. I mean, this will come as some surprise to you. I went to the bar, not knowing that he had me followed. And somebody phoned me later in the day and tipped me off, and I thought, I got to get out of here. What's the safest thing to do? I know, I'll head back to that treatment center. You know, if you're a federal employee in Canada, they can't touch you in the treatment center, so I beat it. Back to the treatment center. And that doctor, who died of his own alcoholism, by the way, took me there at 11 o'clock at night. And I woke up the next day looking at these nuns. Now, I told you that everybody that worked there had to belong to AA, and this nun who ran the detox center was a member of Alcoholics Anonymous. She's a wonderful, wonderful woman. She's been sober forever. And anyway, I kind of said, well, I don't know why I'm here. I was babbling, blubbering, and all that stuff. You got to get the right lip quiver to do it, though. Anyway, she, Sister Bertha, that's her name, and she said to me, do you want to get well? It was about a day after I got there, and I stopped shaking a little bit. And I didn't know what well meant. Well to me was, do you want to stop drinking? And she said, do you want to get well? And I said, yeah. She said, there's 4 things you need to do. 1, you have to understand your alcoholism is a disease. 2, you have to know the consequences of your drinking. What did you lose and who did you lose? 3, you have to have just a glimmer of hope, just a glimmer. And 4, you have to make a decision. She said sobriety is based on decisions, not emotions. You have to make decisions about what you're going to do if you want to get what you want to get. And I said, oh, I never heard that before, Day after that, another member of Alcoholics Anonymous who worked on that staff got me in the office and said, well, you were here before. And I said, yes. Well, what did you do when you were home? I said, what do you mean, what did I do? Well, did you join AA? Well, kind of. Did you go to meetings? Nope. Did you get a sponsor? Nope. Well, then clearly you didn't do your steps. You didn't read the book? No. You didn't do your steps? No. Didn't pray in the morning, pray at night? No. I said, well, listen, Slick. Oh, Slick. I go over to the table after a minute. I go, what? He said, you didn't do anything different. If you don't do anything different, you're going to get what you've always gotten. You've been doing what you've been doing for 10 years now. And he said, you've never changed it. So what you get, it never changes. You got to find a different way of doing it. And I said, well, how am I supposed to do that? How do I find a different way? He said, just ask somebody. Yeah. And that's all he said to me, and he just left it at that. I think, in hindsight, I was ready to become teachable. And I think it's really important, especially if you're new, to understand that we have to become teachable. We have to be willing to listen to people who have gone down the road to recovery and gain some success, and listen to what they've done, and either ask them or ask somebody else who's done the same thing to help us do it. So remember the questions he asked me? Did you join a group, get a book, get a sponsor, do your steps, pray in the morning, pray at night? No. I left that treatment center and they gave me a list. They said, here, go home and do these things. Join a group, get a sponsor, read the book, do the steps, pray in the morning, pray at night. I had never heard that in 10 years. Never. And I thought, this guy he's brilliant. Where do you get this stuff? And I went home, there was nobody in Moncton talking about that. And I got home in Moncton, and there was one guy talking about that. He had just moved from Calgary, west, and he had been with a guy, been sponsored by a guy who was kind of famous for working with newcomers, and he had done most of his steps. That's another story I won't get into, but he had done most of them. And he was really active in AA. And I said, and his name was Bob, and I said, well, Bob, will you be my sponsor? And Bob said, yes, I'll be your sponsor. He said, I talk better than I walk, but I'll be your sponsor. And I said, good, Bob, now here's what we're going to do. And he cared enough about me to tell me to be quiet. He said, you listen to me. You don't know anything about alcoholism, and you don't know anything about recovery. But I'm going to show you what my sponsor showed me, and what my sponsor showed me is in the big book of Alcoholics Anonymous. And you and I are going to read the book together, and we're going to pay attention to the verbs. Where it says write, we're going to write. Where it says read, we're going to read. Where it says consider, we're going to consider. Where it says go do something, we're going to go do it. We are going to go do it. I am going to do it with you. And I was getting steamed up because this guy's giving me direction. I don't like getting orders, right? And I'm about to tell him to fly out the house. And then I had this thought, a moment of sanity. I've been doing what I've been doing for 20 years now. And what I do doesn't work. It just simply doesn't work. This guy's 10 years sober, and I'm 2 months sober. And maybe, just maybe, if I do what he did, I will get to be sober for 10 years, maybe. And I said, yes, Bob. And that was the beginning of me, it was the beginning, I didn't finish though, but that was the beginning of me trying to dictate terms of recovery. I started to do what Bob told me to do, right? And I worked at it really hard. Now, I'll tell you, we started to work on my steps together, and I don't claim to have done my steps perfectly by any stretch of the imagination, but I'll tell you, I don't know anybody that worked harder at them. I did as good as I could possibly do, and I worked really, really hard at them. That's all that's expected of us, is that we do our best at them. We don't have to do them perfectly, They say in one of the books I've read that you have to do step one perfectly, and I'm still, by times, learning what unmanageability means, so I don't know if you ever get to do that perfectly, But what started was, what I would like to talk to you about a little bit more is what I will call the surprises or the miracles or whatever you want to call it that happen in Alcoholics Anonymous. The surprises is the better term for me, I think. I could stand here literally for 2 hours and tell you about things that happened to me that I didn't expect to happen. When they happened, how they happened, and things like that. I for the longest time, through the whole process of the steps, doing my steps, I clung to this thing, if I do this, this will happen. And thank God I would do it anyway. But I would do it, and this wouldn't happen. Something else would happen. And the something else was always better. The surprises that have occurred to me in Alcoholics Anonymous are what saved my life, I believe. I think Sister Bertha was one of the first surprises when she said that to me. The guy that told me about what did you do when you were home last time, surprise number 2. I never heard that stuff before. I wasn't expecting that stuff before. I started to work on my steps with Bob, and my first sponsor, Bob. And he was only able to take me to step 7 before the RCMP took him away in handcuffs, but what's that? He had done something in Alberta years before. It was kind of a commercial thing. He wasn't such a bad dude. He just was greedy back in those days. And they wanted to make an example of him, and away he went. I only found out later, God is interesting, and God's got a real sense of humor. Bob told me he had taken me at that point to step 7, because that's as far as he got. He couldn't take me any further than step 7. And that was about 7 months sober. But then a whole series of surprises happened to me. My boss called me in. I had been exiled up the road, by the way. I went back to work and got spanked a little bit. And I was told, well, if you want to keep your job, you got to go work at the Maximum up the road, about a couple hours away, and you just, we'll keep you there for a couple of years. If you kind of survive then, you might have a job when you get back here to Moncton. So what are you going to say, right? Oh, thank you. So away I went. My sponsor, Bob, had given me a series of tapes to listen to. And he taught me the principle that the mind is like a computer, and it will process, even when you're not looking, what you feed it. He said, if you listen to good speaker tapes, and listen to people who have had recovery, and listen to what they have to say, and listen to what they did, your mind is going to process that, and you don't even know it. He said, you feed it good stuff, it processes good stuff. You feed it garbage, it processes garbage. You feed it the gossip that sometimes goes around AA, that's what it's going to process, So feed it the good stuff. So he gave me a bunch of tapes, and I was driving back and forth to Renorth about 4 or 5 times a week. And it was a 2-hour drive, and I was coming down the road one day, and I was listening to a Father Martin tape, Father Joe Martin, and it was his AA story. And Father Martin said a couple of things that just boom, went like that. I wasn't expecting it. And he said, he talked about, I deserve the best in recovery. I had never heard that term before. I was still, you got to remember, I'm only a few months sober at this point in time. And I was 6 months sober maybe, and I had really, obviously not gotten the deal yet. Father Martin says, I deserve the best in sobriety, and I will go around or over or through or away from anybody or anything that keeps me from the best in sobriety. And I went, oh, I never thought of that before. I never thought about the best in sobriety. Whoever heard about the best in sobriety? I heard about don't drink, go to meetings, you'll be okay, you know? And I thought, that's really neat. I don't know what the best in sobriety means, but I'm going for it. I will do whatever I have to do. I will go wherever I have to go, and I will be with whoever I have to be with in order to find the best in sobriety, what it means and how I get it. And surprise number 2 happened shortly after that. My friend Tom came to visit in town. I still believed that I was going to drink again. I didn't want to drink. I wasn't wanting to drink, you know. I believed I would drink again because I always messed up. For the last 10 years, I've been trying not to drink, and I always drank. So it's not a matter of if I'm going to drink, it's a matter of when I'm going to drink and what I'm going to do to mess it up this time. And somebody called me one night and they said, we got this guy from North Carolina coming to town, and we want to bring him in early for a conference, and we want him to stay at your house. Stay at my house? Are you crazy? You know? And anyway, being the brown noser that I am, I said, oh yeah, okay, you know. So, and I don't know what I was expecting. I had met one guy from out of town in AA, and the guy was busy shaking his finger at me, so I almost cut it off. And anyway, I wasn't know what I was doing. Tom showed up, and we sat and we talked till 2 or 2:30 in the morning. And back then I didn't know what got said. I think I've kind of figured it out since then, but we sat there and talked till 2 o'clock in the morning, and at the end of that discussion, for the first time in my life, I believed that I didn't have to drink anymore. And that was a surprise. And it wasn't planned. It just happened. Shortly after that, my boss, really shortly after that, like about a week later, my boss called me in, and I thought, here it goes. I got the phone call, right? Come up to my office. I thought, oh, here it goes. The other shoe is about to drop. And, you know, they took them long enough to fire me. I wish they had done it, you know, mercifully and quickly. And so up we go to the office. We come in, shut the door. I go in and shut the door and sit down. And I'm 8 months sober, and my boss said, people don't believe the change in you. He said, it's absolutely incredible. And my mouth was hanging open. See, I didn't see any change in me. I didn't understand it. Our book says people will see it in you before you see it in you. And that truly is what happened, you know. I kept working in AA, and my boss said to me, by the way, hey, by this time, this will also come as a big surprise to you. I had been removed as warden of that institution like a few years before, about a year or so before that. And I kind of went in and hinted to my boss one day that I should be moved, and he said, okay. He didn't argue with me at all. And so my 8 months I'm sober, and my boss called me and he says, people don't believe the change in you. Here's 3 promotions. Which one do you want? Promotions, yes, you know. And I said, for some reason or other, none of them. I'm really trying to do something about my alcoholism, and first time I fessed it up to him. I'm trying to do something about my alcoholism. And if I go off path now, I'm done. So I'll stay where I am, thank you very much. And he said, okay. So I worked with on my program for a couple of years, and things went really well. I was getting all kinds of great feedback and so on and so forth. And one day, new boss called me in, and new boss says, we think it's the Commissioner of Corrections for the whole country. He and I have been talking about it, and we think you should be a warden again. And I thought, wow, that's really interesting. So long story short was that I was put back in the same institution, which was again in trouble, by the way. They were having riots and stuff like that. And he says, I want you to get down and fix it. And I said, well, I'll do what I can do. And I went, and we didn't work out all that badly. And then a couple of things happened that were really important to my recovery. There was an institution next door to the big institution, and in our terminology, it was a minimum security institution. Minimum security institutions in Canada are different than in many parts of the States. Many parts of the States, you have to be no risk at all. You don't go to a minimum security institution. You have to be a white-collar criminal or something like that. In Canada, it's a different deal. The law and country, which we pretend to follow all the time, the law in the country is that we are obliged to have a correctional plan for every single inmate, and he's supposed to be housed at the right level of security, no more than he needs. And if he needs no more in the community, that's where he's supposed to be. So my boss, new boss, said to me that that's a pre-release institution. It's, minimum security is a bad name. It doesn't mean that. That institution had lifers. It had guys who had done lots of violent offenses, who had history of crime and so forth. We had some white-collar guys, but we had as many heavy-duty guys as that, and we had about 300 of them. And my boss said to me, that institution is supposed to be getting people ready for release, and he said, we're not doing well. That institution is doing the worst in the country. I want you to go down and make it the best in the country. I said, great, let's go. So it was like a license, here's a blank check, go do what you want. Well, I'll tell you what I did. AA got born again in that institution. We set up a program based on the program that Tom had done down here, based on AA principles. And we started housing the inmates that were involved in that program and doing their steps in residences, but they called them residences because there was no bars on the windows. We housed them in those buildings. So we had 5 buildings with inmates who were doing their steps in Alcoholics Anonymous. We had community staff members coming in every week, and they would go in the residences and sit and talk to the inmates about recovery and about AA and about what they had done. It was like kind of a little bit of group sponsoring, in a sense, at the residence level. The results were amazing. We, at the same time, my belief, I don't want to get into the corrections business with you, but my belief at the time was, it's based on this principle. If you want your kid to learn how to swim, you don't take him to a rink. Take him to a swimming pool. If you want somebody to survive in the community, he's not going to learn that in jail. He's going to learn in the community. So the faster you can get guys into the community, the faster and give them support, the faster they're going to do that, learn that. So we started piling the guys in on work releases into the community, and the result was that 2 years later, or 3 years later, we had the highest level of parole releases in the country, and the lowest level of failure. We had the greatest number of work releases in the country. We had the highest number of drug tests in the country and the lowest number of failures of the drug tests. We had people come from the guards, interestingly enough, and we had half-decent guards, not like the guy last night, but he wasn't a bad guy, he was just afraid, that's all. But we had some half-decent guards in our place, but they were still pretty hard-nosed, some of them. And they were saying, we don't believe what's going on here. Like, this place is just so calm. It's like there's just the tension is, Now everybody wasn't playing the game. Don't let me mislead you. This is not Nirvana by a long shot, And everybody didn't go with the program, but the guys that did had such an influence on the place that there was a level of calm over the whole institution that you couldn't deny. There were people who came from Europe who they do tours. They've done tours down here and everywhere else, but they go on tours, and they came to our institution. And one guy from Belgium and another one from France came to me and said, we don't believe this place. We've been down in the residences, and the inmates invited us in to sit down to have coffee, and he said it was like, it was incredible. We don't have that kind of relationship with our inmates. And it was just, again, not to exaggerate it, but it made a significant change in our place. One of the things that happened to me, there are a number of things that happened to me that were gifts of recovery. One was that when I left that institution, when I retired as a warden, the head of the inmate committee kind of banged on the door one day, and he says, "Can I see you?" And I said, "Yeah." You have to know that This guy was he was a solid guy. He used their terminology. He was the head of the committee. He had been a street guy. He was a drug dealer. He was doing 10 years for manslaughter. Like he wasn't the warden's little boy by a long shot, But I personally like to deal with him. And he came in and he says, I got something from the guys, and they gave me this letter. And the letter says, the opening part of the letter says, your time is coming to an end, and we don't want you leaving here thinking you didn't get anything done. Like, we're really sorry that you're leaving. Now, if that sounds like, aren't I wonderful? I don't mean it that way. This is not about me. This is the transformation that Alcoholics Anonymous made in that institution. I just happened to be there, watch it. It was AA that made that change in that place. And I still have that letter to this day. That was an important letter for me. Let me tell you about another surprise. Just when I retired, I've been retired a number of years now, and when I retired, I started doing workshops, big book workshops at that institution where I'd been the warden. And there was three of us that did that together, and we would do these workshops that would go on for 15 to 18 weeks, depending on how we did it. And it was interesting because it was all based on AA stuff. The same thing would happen every time. We would start with like 18 guys, 17 guys, something like that. We would lose one the first night. And then we would go through the rules, like, here's what we're going to do, here's how we're going to do it. You want to play, come play. If you don't want to play, and we'd lose one. And we would never lose one after that. Every time we did that, we never lost an inmate. They showed up on time, they did the work, they were there every week. There was one guy. I got to tell you a side story first because it's important. Tom and I were driving around North Carolina one time. I think we were debating whether he was going to become my sponsor. So I had to come down here on 3 trips to get him to sponsor me, by the way. And we were driving around, and I asked him a question. And I said, Tom, when you get out of prison, what was the most important thing you wanted to get? And I really expected him to say, get a job, get a better job. Get a car, get a better car. Get a girlfriend, get a better girlfriend. Like, something like that. The greedy stuff that we want, I really expected him to say something like that. That's not a condemnation of him, that's a judgment on me. But anyway, that's what I expected. And with Oak Lincoln, he said, become a citizen. And I said, pardon? He said, I wanted to become a citizen. I didn't feel like I deserved to be in the community. And I didn't think they wanted me in the community. And I really wanted to be part of it. I wanted to become an active citizen in the community. And I was like, wow, really? Surprise, surprise. I didn't expect that. We started doing these workshops when I retired at the institution. And one of the nights was devoted to that story. You were talking about guys who had done a lot of time. If I picture them in my mind now going around the room of all the different sessions that we did, there were some heavy-duty guys in that room. And we told that story about becoming a citizen and making a decision to embrace the program of recovery in AA so that we could be part of a family, our own families, part of a community, part of a work family, and so on and so forth, becoming a citizen. But you have to decide that you cannot plan it out. You have to decide that you cannot do this expecting that to happen, because I'm telling you right now, it's not going to work that way. And that was it. We went on and did the thing. We had one guy in those workshops by the name of Chris. Now, Chris was a loser, in my personal estimation. Chris had been in and out, and in and out, and in and out, and in and out. And he would come in and he would be Mr. AA. He would quote the book, or you wouldn't believe it, boy. Except he couldn't, he didn't practice it very well. So he would quote the book, be Mr. AA, somebody would believe him, they'd let him out. He'd be out 2 months, he'd be back again. Thankfully not because he committed another crime, but he would violate the terms of his parole or something like that. And he'd come back and he'd become Mr. AA and he'd do it all over again. Did it a number of times, and I just thought, this guy's going to do it forever. Anyway, he wanted to be in this workshop. I didn't screen anybody in or out of those workshops. And those workshops were really based on, remember those 4 things I told you Sister Bertha told me? You know, understand your alcoholism, know what you lost, have a glimmer of hope, and make a decision. The decision in those workshops was to do what we present to you from the Big Book of Alcoholics Anonymous. We did a number of those over the years and the way we went. Last year, I got this phone call one night, and who's on the phone but Chris? And I didn't even know he was out. And he says, yeah, he says, I'm out, and he says, I'm 10 years sober next week. I said, really? He said, would you come to St. John? You know St. John? Would you come to St. John to speak at my cake? And I said, yes, I will. I'd be glad to. So I went up and I spoke, and I found out that he was an active member of that group. He was in the community. He was sponsoring guys. He was foster person. He was actually literally taking care of 2 autistic kids by himself. The courts had awarded him custody of those kids. And he was helping a local church with their program for the homeless in St. John. I was really impressed. So I did the talk, and then I went back home, and we were at my group one night, and then we said, guys were saying, well, we got a speaker meeting coming up, who should we get? I said, I got an idea for you. So we got Chris down to our group, and Chris gave a really nice talk. And he said, the turning point in my life came when I was doing those workshops with him, which is me, and he did a session one night on becoming a citizen. And he said, and it really struck me, and making a decision to do the things in Alcoholics Anonymous that would help me become a citizen. If I would do those things that will help me become a citizen of my community in Alcoholics Anonymous and a member of the Alcoholics Anonymous community, I won't drink anymore. And I won't come back to jail anymore. And he said it was all, what happened to me was based on that story. So the surprise for me was, I bet you Tom told me that story 20 years ago. 20 years later, it comes back to roost. 20 years later, the result of that story is evident. And for me, it was like, those are the neat stories. You know, the things that happen like that just aren't explainable. If it happens and it's not explainable, call it what you want. For me, it's a miracle. You know? I got to close. I'll tell you, I got to tell you one quick story, and then I'll be quiet. Steve is married to not married to, he's got a brother-in-law in Newfoundland. We were talking outside the meeting about his brother in Newfoundland. I said, well, that's interesting. I'm going to talk about Newfoundland tonight. One of the guys who did workshops for me was originally from Newfoundland, and he died about 6 months ago, and I was asked to do the eulogy at his funeral, and him and I used to talk about this story. The story happened to him and not to me, but it is a wonderful story and drives across the message of this program. And so Les told me, he said, I'm not going to be around to tell the story, so it's yours now. But it really happened to him. Now, I don't know if you know anything about Newfoundland, but Newfoundland is the most easterly province in Canada. It's way, way, way out in the ocean. If you leave Moncton on an airplane, you can fly to London as fast as you can fly to Newfoundland. I'm serious. It's like way out there. And the seas, you can imagine, in the Atlantic are rough. And this is like a rocky province. Like, you know, it's incredibly beautiful if you go there. But the waves have been beating on that island for years and years and years. And the people are kind of tough as nails, you know, and their whole economy at one point in time was based on the fishery. And the inshore fishermen used to, and still do, some of them, they fish in dories. If you don't know what a dory is, it's like a rowboat, but they're quite big, and some of them are meant to have 3 or 4 people to do inshore fishing on. You know, like they go out and they throw the nets and they haul them into the dories. So it takes a couple of guys to roll them out. So, you know, in AA, when, you know, a newcomer comes and talks to an old guy, and the guys are, get in the car, you know. You ever hear that, get in the car? In Newfoundland, get in the dory. You know, when I talk, get in the dory. You fall on your knees on the shore and reach out and look up to God. And say, tell me about the meaning of life. Voice from heaven will say, get in the dory. Last, my friend got sober in AA, but he was having a terrible time understanding that there was a power greater than him that would make things happen. He had a hard time understanding it. He had a hard time accepting that, not understanding it. It's not about understanding. You understand it after you see it, you know. He had a hard time. He went home and he talked to his father, and his father was very spiritual. And he says, Dad, I really need to talk to you about the idea of the spiritual powers. I need you to talk to me. And his father said, get in the dory. Out they go. And so his father says to him, his father was a really simple fisherman. He says, listen, he said, you know about the wind. He said, you know about the wind, right? He said, yeah. He said, well, he says, you know, the wind has caused a lot of good things and bad things to happen in Newfoundland. He says, we've had storms and villages have been leveled and ships have been sunk and life has been lost. And he said, by the same token, he said, you know, the fishing boats, the big fishing boats, they used to go out on the sails. It was the wind that took them out and brought them back. And Les' father said to him, have you ever seen the wind? And Les said, no. And he said, neither have I. But I have seen what the wind can do. And because I've seen what the wind can do, I know that the wind is there. And I've seen what a power greater than a human power can do in our program. And the best with Tom, again, I keep referring back to things he said to me. I remember saying, you know, I grew up in a church and I don't have any problem with the church, never did. But I always had this hard time on, you know, kind of if I reached long enough, hard enough, you know, God will do something. And then Tom had said one time, you know, something like, you know, there is a power greater than a human power in this program. There's a synergy in this room because we're all united in recovery, or we're all united in at least the desire to have recovery from alcoholism. So that synergy is in the power of, but there's a power way beyond that happens. And I will tell you that that I have seen what the wind can do in this program. When I retired from corrections, the people that were going to fire me 20-some years ago immediately rehired me to teach wardens how to be wardens. They only hired 22 of us across the whole country. My boys stood up. I was 2 years sober, and my two boys, including the boy that wrote the letter, stood up in an AA meeting, not because I asked them, because they wanted to. Stood up on my second anniversary and thanked AA for giving them their father. My young son, who was 2.5 when I got sober, is now 30 years old. Wonderful young man. And he finished university last year. He did a couple of degrees, and he told me, he says, you know, he said, I'm really, really lucky. There was 10 of us used to hang around together, and if you notice, they always used to hang out at our house. And they used to hang out at our house because it was a good place to be. And he said, you've always been there for me. So if you had asked me when I said about I'm going to be the best father that Kevin could ever have, what would that mean? I would probably say to you something like, I always want to be there for him. And AA gave that to me for my youngest son. It gave me another chance all over again. I have seen what the wind can do. I came down here 20 years ago or so and watched this group get formed, and I saw what the wind can do. And I went to Morrison with the guys last night, with Wallace and Tom and a bunch of and Daniel, and I saw what the wind can do. And my life has turned around completely. And I couldn't ask for a better life. I mean, life has got its problems, but that's what life is. Life's just a big problem-solving opportunity, you know? I can absolutely guarantee my life has changed around. My family is together, and if I wanted anything out of recovery, it was that. And I have felt what the wind can do. I wish you the wind beneath your wings. Thank you very much.